Welcome, guys. Welcome, everyone.
Okay, so the first thing that we would like to thank everyone who joined the contest. So far, the output that we've seen from your side is pretty incredible, pretty exciting to see how you guys push this stuff. And today we actually would like to dive into, that a little bit more into how you guys can push your stuff, or for those that are still developing your work in progresses, what you can or what you should avoid, and how you can tackle your designs efficiently, how to present it efficiently, what to do, what not to do, and so on. So maybe I'm gonna share my screen and we can go with Michal quickly over the work in progress channel because there's quite a lot of stuff over there. So let me know if it works. Do you guys see my screen?
Yes. It's just in the mention you can click on the screen so to make full screen, guys, if you want to see clearly.
Right, let's go to the first ones. So of course we've seen that many of you have been pushing stuff. There were some questions that we believe we addressed in terms of like the brief, because in the beginning it was a little bit vague for some of the participants. But I think it slowly starts to getting there when it comes to progress, when it comes to your process, when it comes to presentation. It's definitely having that sweet spot of what we would like you to achieve and what we would like to see. Because this is like a heavily design based task, but we also need to be able to present our designs, right? So many times we see either beautiful presentations and not so thought through designs, or we actually see great designs but not really well presented, right? So this is a tricky one, but it's also very, very rooted to the industry standards and how do we teach at the school, right? I wish we could actually scroll through pictures. We can just only click one by one. But I saw also Michal put some of his explorations, which were, I guess, a great addition and inspiring stuff. Uh, Definitely like getting this like more organic vibe. But I also like when some of you are really tackling that brutalist architecture, and we actually gathered some of the references today to go over this stuff. And I would love to address also, aspects like, thought through process, and design unification. For instance, this person, I don't know the name, but it's like Dread Lady, I guess. For instance, like a very good thought through process. However, I think we can address some of like shape language and design principles that could be aligned a little bit better. But let's go over, very quickly the rest of the work, since there is like a pretty loads of good stuff. And maybe since we are starting to getting more and more people joining, and I think it will be like that for a while, that people will be joining, maybe we can actually see if there is like anything that like pops up in terms of questions, if there's like anyone who would like to go and have like a proper in-depth overview of your works. Otherwise I think we would be just like going randomly through some of them, right, Michal?
Yeah, that's correct. By the way, I didn't have the chance to test, so can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear.
Yes,
Awesome.
everything is okay.
Nice. Yeah, like Darek and Wojtek already did the intro, I just wanted to say that I'm very impressed with the amount of work. Thank you again for joining these year's scholarships. I'm very positively impressed of what we are seeing, but as always, it's a tradition of every time we do a contest or scholarship, we like to get you some insight in order to elevate not only the motivation, but give you some insight tips of how these kind of tasks are tackled in our industry. Our industry is more demanding. it's getting more demanding as ever as technology goes forward. So it's extremely important that we, give you at least a little bit of a rudimentary level insight on how to tackle these tasks. It is very important that it's separate from our advanced teachings at Focal Point, but it is our goal to do these kinds of events once in a while to strengthen our community and give away here and there some tips in order to elevate your design thinking. So I am definitely open to do some feedbacks as well, directs as well. And if no one will have questions, I guess it is a good idea to pick some randoms, as I think that even if we pick someone, the rest of the people that joined us today will also benefit from it. What do you think, Darek?
I'm more than up for it or down for it that we can
Yeah.
actually pick up someone who has like any specific questions. I think that would be definitely more beneficial for those that are joining us because we know that it's like still over 10 years, 10 days to actually wrap up this contest. So you guys can still have plenty of time to inject some of the feedback. And since some of you are already pretty much like pushed in terms of like your entry, I think that would be great to actually have someone that like either struggles with something or seek for inspiration or basically for any help, right? Because we are keeping this Discord live. That's very important, guys. We are keeping this Discord live in order to build a community where you guys can actually help each other, when you guys can interact with each other, elevate your skills, and basically elevate and grow together. This is exactly what we've been doing with Michal for, I think, like over 10 years that we know each other, and basically we were pushing ourselves to their limits all the time, and that's how you basically build community. Community doesn't mean that you have to, only join a group of like thousands of people. No, like you can basically create your like a art circle and work together along the tasks, right? Along the task at the school or along the task like this one for the contest. Use that channel to the maximum, right? We are doing, I guess a good work on to keeping this community alive, and of course like it's still growing and still like being pushed forward. However, like we can just throw at you a certain subject. How you're gonna use that, how you're gonna build a community around it, is of course up to you. So that's exactly what we would like to share. So out of those that are basically already participated, or those that are basically joining us today, is there anyone that would like to have some feedback or maybe some specific questions? Because we can also treat this series or like this certain stream as some sort of like a question and answers, since we don't do them much often recently. We just basically get back from London yesterday on Concept 101 event, which was I believe a great success. And there's always a lot of people that are approaching certain problems, right? Certain attitudes or certain situations, how to stay motivated, how to grow, how to avoid certain mistakes, how to build a successful career, and so on. And we believe that through doing this sort of tasks, through doing this sort of stuff, you can actually achieve your levels much faster, because we want to give you tasks that are exciting. We teach the same way at the school, right? We teach the same way that we give tasks that are exciting, not only for us, but also we believe it's gonna be exciting for you. So DUNE is such a huge world and has so many different visions on it, different ideas and different point of views from comics to books, from books to movies, from different adaptations, even the games, even the ones that are not released or were never really finished. That this world has like a huge potential. So we believe that with this task, you can push the boundaries, you can push yourself to the limits faster than by just studying, for instance, a Dune from the movie or Dune from some other resources, right? where you actually are able to put your own ideas, where you're actually able to put yourself on the real ground of designing this world, is exactly what makes you elevating your skills much faster than just by doing studies of existing designs, right? Maybe Michał would like to add something.
Okay. We have Sian want to ask questions, so I can invite him for the stage. I think you have, yeah, you are on the stage, so please,
Yeah,
Sian, can you ask?
yeah. Hi guys. I'm really
Hello,
big fan.
Hello, guys. Hello.
hello,
um,
Cian.
yeah. I'm really nervous. But yeah. Just coming to the question. So I would love to get feedback on my work. Like if you could, if you would do that. But like specifically, I've got like a couple of questions regarding this. That there are like three design components. That there's Arrakis environment, there is the functionality of the refinery, and then there is like whatever house we are choosing. Now, my main problem is that I am having trouble like kind of incorporating because I've chosen how the trade is, and I like Arrakis environment and the refinery things are easier to incorporate, like balance with each other, but I'm having difficulty putting that house activities thing in. So like I would love some advice on how to do that, or any comments on if I have been anywhere successful. I used because since activities are royalty, so I used like Rajasthani forts, which are like incorporated into hills and an inspiration. I don't know if that has come through though. And another question I have regarding the architecture is that when we are having like the sandstorms and we have to cover everything up, right? Basically, everything exposed is at risk. We can't really show the internal industrial forms. So, if we are having to cover everything, how do we show that functionality in terms of like proportion, scale, and also detail distribution?
I
So,
think that's a
again,
very
if
good question. I think it's a very good question, and since I see that it's environment-related work for now that you're doing, I can answer it if Darek wants to take a rest. But since it's kind of connected to Darek's environment class, maybe Darek can help you with that as well. What do you think, Darek?
Definitely. I
Uh,
think also since Sian was asking for like picking the right house of like the design, maybe what do you think, Michael, if we go quickly, since you are probably a better person to go over the houses of the Dune world,
mhm.
we can go over the
Yeah.
houses, like how what's the difference between them, and then I will take over
Mm.
the environment functionality of showing this place.
Yeah, I think your first question was also related to the functionality, right? I think Darek can elevate it later on, but what I will do if I were you, Cian, and again, guys, this doesn't only go for Cian, but what you always do at school is that we try to always give feedback so it benefits the whole class. So I'm going to try to do the same here. When I look here at Cian's work, we live now in a time that presentations and pretty picture aspect is relatively easy to achieve. I'm not saying that what you did here is easy because it still has lighting components, nice composition. However, for now I see some kind of fortress. This is
Mm-hmm.
what
Sorry, Michał,
yeah
can you share the screen? Or Darek, can you
I
share
can
the
share
screen
the
so we
screen.
see
I
I
can.
can
what's
yeah
I can share the
yeah.
screen since I'm recording it. 1 second. 1 second,
Mhm.
guys.
so we know that what we are talking about. It will be
Yeah,
Yeah,
and that's
very good
actually
easier
point.
for everyone else.
yeah. Please don't over talk to each other because we will have like some echo. But I think it's a good idea so Mikkel can go over this the screen share that I'm doing, and then I can do a maybe quick pinpoint in Photoshop of how we can incorporate the functionality of it, right?
Yes. So right now what we see shared at the screen, for me, when I look at this, it looks more as some kind of fortified fort. I
Mm-hmm.
do miss certain components which will visually communicate to me that we're talking about the refinery, right?
Exactly.
I'm not saying this is wrong. You're definitely having here some interesting shapes that could showcase what kind of civilization we're talking about, what kind of technology level. So this is pretty much high level concepting, right? When we want to sub design, certain parts, sub means under, so going smaller level, higher detail, and showcasing the functionality of your facility a little bit more, start to think and look at real life components, right? So what does a real refinery have? What does a real petroleum silo look like? How is it connected with one another? What does a refinery need, right? A refinery definitely needs some kind of space where they refine whatever material it is, from petroleum, or how certain metals are refined to certain alloys, etc. You need storage, so silos. You need definitely certain access points for vehicles that are depositing it, right? These are kind of the key components which will also dictate how the form factor of that facility will look like. So for now, I'm seeing a lot of complexity going on, interesting shapes, but I love definitely to see the thinking process of all these elements. And when it comes to the second question, where you said, well, there are sandstorms, how do I showcase that, when there's sandstorms, certain components have to be covered? That's a very good thing to keep in mind, because you're already thinking on a realistic level. However, we are trying in entertainment design, we're trying to find the perfect right balance between functionality, richness, and immersion, and entertainment. So we are not going to go as far and think about, oh my God, what will happen if that sand will come into that mechanical detail. We are trying to marry both worlds together, so the entertainment aspect and the functional aspect. So mechanical, functional detail can look cool and without too much realism, so it doesn't look too boring, of course.
Yeah.
So that will be my input, shortly put. I could go on, but I think it's a good time to give the voice back to Darek, because I think he has some strong points on this one as well, because he specializes in that stuff in class, right?
Yeah.
So
a very good intro, Michal. Thanks. Let me just grab your piece here, and let's try to break it down. The first thing that I hope you guys can see my screen right now. That I'm gonna head over to Photoshop. Wojtek, can you confirm if everything works?
Unfortunately, I have some issue on my side, so I've seen that the chat everyone say yes. So
Okay.
yeah,
So it's only your
I try
issue
to
then.
figure out on my. Yeah. Unfortunately.
Okay, so the first thing that I'm kind of like I'm definitely on the same page as Michal. It kind of looks like a fortress, right? If you compare my refinery, that I have my Blender file open here, and this kind of feels like a fortress, right? But it kind of like it gets like certain vibe of like like huge chimneys, like a main central point. There's like connection docks between the structures. You have a city underneath, and this is definitely like more of like a broader space that we are not really covered or like only stuck to the mountains or to the rock structures you have. But let's say that we actually would like to keep your essence of like the environment, because this might be your thing. This might be your idea to keep the grounds elevated and like sort of like evened out in terms of like the layout, right? So let's maybe just like take this canvas a little bit wider even. And the very first thing that we would be very specified about if you present this work in class, if you do callouts, and we both, me and Michal, when we do like high level concepts, we both do a lot of callouts when it comes to vehicles, environments, characters, hard surface, like specific props and so on. So the very first thing is that, like, for instance, if you have a certain way of typing, it's going to be very hard for the client to not only visualize your idea with your main shapes, but also understanding what you write, right? So I would keep it as simple as possible. So like keep the straight lines for the callouts and use the text written, right? So if you have like a main building, just basically type it, it's gonna be, of course, much more visible, right? You can keep, of course, like a smaller, fine-tuned type, but it's definitely better readable than some of those like bubbles on the side, right? The other thing that Michal roughly touched upon is like that the whole kind of structure. If I were just basically, sketch out your environment from the side view, it would look some sort of like a, overgrown, structures of like some random buildings, right? That's how basically it would be scattered around. But you can take this environment, and it doesn't really mean that you cannot really use that environment as your startup, but you gotta find a way to communicate with the viewer that what you are doing is some like a, like a specifically given functional area, right? The building, right? So it can have like a certain shapes. It can have like a certain, components like the chimneys, right? Like some structures that are creating the whole infrastructure, and you scatter it around the whole area. So it's not just like a condensed within this, rectangle or this triangular shape, but maybe you have like a main area of the environment here, but also you build like some all sorts of like a complex intersecting different areas, different infrastructures, different ways of like transporting the resource that they are digging, right? Because if they build a refinery, if they build the refineries in real life, it's usually not just like one spot where you can basically have all the buildings. No, because you have to have the main headquarters or the main like a digging or drilling tower, right? You have to have like a transportation area, so maybe like some tunnels or like some platforms that are interconnecting with the other headquarters. You would have to have also like the whole sort of like a area to transport it out, because since this is the resource that it will be redistributed, or it's gonna be transported onto the other areas of the world or of the city. You have to build a whole infrastructure around it, so it doesn't really feel like one chunk of the environment, right? The other aspect is like, of course, we can keep in mind that there's like some sort of like a sandstorms going on, right? But it doesn't mean that the design cannot have like any nice breaking spots. So let's say that we're gonna take this shape that you have on the top, right? Because this is actually pretty interesting shape, and you only have like just very empty walls with no windows, no holes, no markings, no decals, no anything. But even when you stick to this main shape, you can just duplicate that shape across, and for instance build like interesting pattern. So let's say that I'm just gonna duplicate that shape, right? And even if it's like just like a pattern, if it's just like a maybe paneling system, it kind of brings some really interesting shape language, right? So this is basically what we call continuous shape language, right? Or basically more unified shape language. And this is just like a very basic of designing, right? But however, you can incorporate those patterns to, as Michal said before, you can suggest certain mechanisms. Maybe this is just like some, if we look at, this is front, right? So this is that facade. And if you have like a heavy sands and they are like hitting the surface, but your surface is nicely sloped, so it's creating like a proper fortification for this wall. But maybe the mechanism can be on the sides, right? So maybe here you can have some openings. Maybe these are the windows, or maybe there are like a panels that are basically being folded together and they are sliding onto, maybe during the very heavy sandstorms, maybe this whole phase, if I'm just gonna, my Photoshop is a little bit laggy because I'm recording, but I hope you guys can see that. But imagine if this is like basically like a full on a panel that basically is like sliding onto the structure during the heavy sandstorms. And when there is like no heavy sandstorm, because you are building this concept in more of like a clear dome sky situation, maybe this panel is actually uncovered, right? Or maybe this is like sliding from in between those structures, right? So you can think about like the functionality that actually works along with your shape language. It doesn't mean that you have to have just like a chunks of very heavy fortified blocks, right? So to sum up, first thing, you're gonna also incorporate some of the knowledge that you can get from like a real life references and seeing that the refinery has like all sort of components. You have like drilling towers, you have like a whole redistributing infrastructure, you have a storage room, you have maybe that some of the towers are under construction, you have like a worker space, right? All the living area. It's basically all the information you need are already in the real life, and you can basically just fortify that with your own approach to the shape language, right? To the shape language of the Dune. But as Michal said before, and as we always remind people, you can have both engineering point of view, but also that like extra definition of visual fidelity that kind of speaks for the certain world, right? So just to sum up, the first thing would be redistributing this place more accordingly, so it doesn't feel just like a chunk of like a castle. So it feels more of like a fully condensed infrastructure, exactly like a real life refineries. Then work around your shapes to bring some like sub-level details and keep your design distribution even. And of course, like think about the infrastructure around this area. So how does those materials or resources are being stored? How they are being redistributed across the other areas of the world? Because even in the movie, maybe not this shot, but maybe here, you see that the whole world is kind of interconnected with each other, right? You have like some areas, of course, where there's like some hills and mountains, but the whole city seems like it's being, connected via tunnels, via buildings, via maybe intersected platforms. Here, your refinery kind of feels like just one fortress in the middle of the desert, and it doesn't really bring any vibe of the full infrastructure, right? So hopefully this is gonna be helpful for you, and maybe Michal would like to add something to that.
Well, I think that you got that you shared a lot of information here. Nevertheless, I think that Sian presented here a beautiful piece of work with a lot of potential, and the points that you added will just elevate this work even more, I think. So yeah,
Yeah,
if you want, we can definitely move forward.
right on.
Okay, so next question we have from Lester in chat. Hello, I'm wondering if you can demonstrate the correct balance to strike between the entry being informative but also beautiful. As it is described in the brief, I can link my work in progress if needed. But I think
that Lester can join our stage, and then he can back up verbally what he means, because I don't know what he means by between the entry being informative. So he can definitely join us and speak with us, right?
yes, I can. Okay. I invite you, Lester, so you should have possibility to join now on the stage. Yeah, you have to click join the stage.
Maybe you can invite him to speak.
I invite him, but you have to accept that to join. So maybe someone else before Lester could join us. So maybe someone else have any other question or want to ask something? Okay. He write that he cannot join because probably maybe
Lester is on his
because
Discord is not mobile friendly, it seems. Yeah, we can definitely move on with we can pick a work from the
so you can
channel.
maybe Lester, you can, if you cannot join, you can maybe
join,
just write
on, right?
once write more about the question, and in between we are going further.
Let me check up this. Lester, can you please let us know if you already have a work in progress shot, so we can check it out, and then we can go through it basically, so you don't have to. That's tons of work to go through. Oh yeah, I see it. Right, I see that Lester already did the Ornithopter explorations, and I see the Refinery explorations. Could you, Darek, please share the screen on that? Or
yeah, I will
share.
I will. I can. You can maybe share the screen. I'm gonna record it anyway.
Yeah, so that I can also do some pointers, right?
Exactly.
Let me.
I see that he also update some new version on the chat. So if you can look also on that.
Share your screen. All right, let's take this easy. Before I move on, I'm gonna make sure if Darek is able to view my screen. Go live. Okay. Darek, can you see my screen?
Yes.
It's screenception now.
Yeah.
Can you see that?
Yes, of course.
Okay. And over here we had. I have to scroll up again. So I don't know if Lester, this is your latest entry, but I'm just gonna take that since you cannot live talk to us, which is a shame. I'm gonna talk about the Ornithopter. We can see that Lester has been very busy. He has also some nice explorations. This is always what I'm always a fan of: side explorations, showing the strong silhouette and form. Very strong and very effective when you are tackling high-level forms. So definitely a good approach. But since Darek did a nice advanced insight on how to tackle Refinery, I hope that Lester will also extract some knowledge and pointers from that. Why isn't it? Let's move forward with this one. I'm gonna grab the screen. Very cool. Appreciate the logo as always. And here I have my own reference sheet, which we can talk about later or talk on top of your work. And let's talk about some crucial points which I would watch out for or definitely try to incorporate if I would be you, basically, right? I don't know still mean what you mean by the entry aspect, but I think what you meant was how to find the right balance between realism and something that looks exotic. Often when concept artists start as juniors or as beginners, it is very hard for them to imagine worlds like Dune, because Frank Herbert was very, very wild with his explanations, and certain things were not even explained to so much detail. For example, the difference between House Harkonnen and House Atreides is maybe explained in its cultural and value kind of aspect range, but I don't think that he ever went strongly into detail how visually they showcase themselves. However, we as concept artists, and with the information that we have from the books, we can play around with that. For example, if we have look at the real world, and we look at a Viking barbaristic culture like the Vikings, then we can connect a certain visual language to that, right? They will not have beautiful, nice, ornament temples. They will have something that's roughly built, that just works. Their culture is about raiding and pillaging. They will have some here and there beautiful structures and something that presents their culture with quality, but it's not their priority since it's not in their culture. And it is for concept artists the task to find that visual connection to their behavior and to their values. Then, when you look at a civilization like the ancient Greeks, where they were way more organized, they were the first to incorporate some democratic values. The science was on a very high level. They had beautiful temples. And if that sort of things are explained in a book, then you of course don't see it. But again, as a concept artist, it is your task to visually problem solve. How would a advanced civilization look like that?
Mhm. Can
The
I also
same
add
we
something
have
to that?
with, yeah.
Since you touched upon the civilization and the advancement of that, uh, we can basically ask ourselves a question like, what do we what do we consider advancement and what do we consider advanced civilization? Because even though in today's times we have all the technology, we have computers, we have nanometrics processors, we have a fundamental knowledge on the space, right? That we are still exploring. We are still scratching our heads how advanced, for instance, ancient Egyptians were with like their build up of the pyramids, right? With their build up of such a huge monumental structures, and how did they do that whilst they didn't have any of the equipment that we have today? So this might be a good idea also to explore that advancements of the technology or advancements of the civilization is very subjective, right? We have they might look primitive from the outside, but what they do and how they do it is gonna be very advanced, right? So for instance, if you have also some of the other ancient times or other ancient like livings, and they built like a beautiful ornaments, and most of them were made handmade. We are still in awe today how they achieved that like 6 or 7 or 10 centuries ago, right? So this also shows us that like difference between the houses, different between the civilizations can have like advancements on so many different levels. It can be high-tech advancements, but it also can be utilizing the shapes, utilizing the forms that are complex and beautiful within the primitive tools, right? So I think it's also very important to keep in mind when you are building or when you are working on such a world building task. So just 2 cents from me after I heard about like the advancement.
Yeah, so yeah, thanks for the insight. I think it is very important to remember that yeah, advancement is of course subjective. Um, but what I meant by that is of course that just my main point would be to immerse yourself in that world, right? And my main point was as well when I was comparing the two civilizations or societies, Vikings versus the Roman Empire, for example, is how can we use that knowledge from the real world and connect it to something like the world of Dune, which is a totally different world, but believe it or not, it is strongly connected with what we are experiencing, what we experience in the real world, right? The houses, the
Yeah.
technology, even the political intrigues and religions. I think that June really showcases also a lot from the Islamic culture, Arabic culture. The Sand people are really strong connected. They have strong references to to the Arabic cultures from the real world, and I think Frank Herbert at one point even admitted that. The language that is made up in the books is also connected to that. And then you have some a house like House Atreides, which is again strongly referenced to some of the European cultures that we've experienced in the real life. Going back to your design here specifically, Lester, what I'm definitely missing, and I kind of like when Darek was talking, I kind of started to want to show on the canvas something that could have like a good insight for you already. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to kind of capture your essence of the design that you came up with, which is very organic. I see that you did strong references of some insects, which is, I think, something that I did. And given the fact that the organic nature and functionality of the ornithopter, which basically involves the wings moving like a real dragonfly, is very inspirational. And I think a lot of people were looking at dragonflies. However, when I'm looking at the original, what you saw me doing is, well, I kind of took what you had, right? You see, and it looks very
Shrunk.
this is what my main points would be. This one looks very short and squeezed. It looks very cute. It doesn't look like it could harm anyone. And I'm not saying that your vehicle should be harmful. But I think that the ornithopter, being, you know, the main kind of workhorse of transporting and reconnaissance, and potentially being retrofitted as a fighter for a certain house in this world, it needs to evoke and have an impactful visual design language, so that when the opponent sees it, or when someone else from the same house sees it, they can feel proud. They can feel pride, and when the opponent sees it, they have this feeling of fear. You know, so like a feeling of, well, perhaps I should not mess around. When you look at fighters, for example, from the real world, right? Like here we have an F-16. It's already an aging aircraft, but you can see that there are no proportions that are making this aircraft cute. It is like has a stretched out form. It has aggressive shapes, very arrow-like, right? It has, you know, a very nice sub-design language in terms of, you know, all these details that are like making up the complexity, and everything is on a consistent level, meaning that if I have a line that goes like this, which defines the silhouette of the aircraft, then this line over here that makes out the panel doesn't do this out of the sudden. They do it here, but on a very smaller level. The main lines are listening to the outer shapes. This is something that we go on a very advanced level in our classes. And well, that is what we mainly teach, right? Not only how to use fancy tools, but how to actually think as a designer. When I see this, unfortunately, I see here many collisions, many shapes that are in conflict with each other, starting with the silhouette. The silhouette is very, it looks like a very fat, like a very fat dragonfly, right? It doesn't have that sleek form. So instead of a form of a dragonfly that could be like this, right, with a long tail, it already looks aggressive, right?
Yeah.
We have something very chunky and chubby that just squeezes down the design. There's no need for that. So what is the first thing that I did? I hope you saw me doing it as well. I know that sometimes multitasking is a thing that we have to do. Darek was explaining things. I started to work. What the first thing I did is I just took your sketch and I just lengthened it, right? I just stretched it out. Look how much we already achieved, right? Can you see that? If I turn off that layer, where is it? Yeah, see, I just stretched it and I warped it so that we have a little bit of shape dynamics that go towards a point where we can make this design stand out. And then in between these two shapes, we're going to implement a line that is maybe separating that design. But in no case, I will start with lines that go like this and this. Same thing that you have here, right? When I look at your sketch, which you're having, just turn this off here. Now this is your corrected sketch. We have here a form factor that I then just corrected a little bit, but then the lines that are inside of your silhouette, so depending line, something that Darek also already talked about on his on the environment piece, so you can see that certain things really interconnect with one another. You can see that when we start dissecting your design and go through the separation of your panels, we are starting to lose a lot of sense. It's very important to remember that all these lines, you can have a lot of lines which are, in the real world, we can connect it to that, there are separation panels, silhouette, definition forms, wings, but every little shape that comes in between and around the major shape needs to be impacted and needs to listen to that major shape. So if I come up with a shape like that, so my corrected version of your sketch, and I start looking at your shapes, and I can see that, okay, there's some separation, but it doesn't make any sense, right? This has its own world. It's maybe this line is slightly listening to this belly over here, but then we have a line here that, well, it's not listening to this, that's for sure, right? It's a new design language. It's a new sub-design language that you come up with. Sometimes it is possible, the more experience you gain as a concept artist, and when you have your design philosophy in check, you can make it work when there is a functional reason for it, for example. But then your second line is something like this. So not only is this not straight anymore, it again has its own world and it has a different shape language, right, than this one. Here we have a bigger curve. Here we have another curve while this is straight. And now what happens when I have a separation like this, guys? Trying to keep it as short as possible, but very important to remember, I think. Now I came up with a new shape, and many people will not think like that when you just make a line like this and a line like this. Now you made a shape that really doesn't make sense, because by making certain shapes and lines, you are creating a new shape. That means that if I take this plane apart in logical segments, I have right now a piece that looks like this, right? Well, in the real world, a piece like this, I tell you, will not make much sense, because look at the thickness between them. It doesn't have any flow. It's just not listening to anything, right? So in order to be a little bit more clear and to now follow up with some visual explanation, it will be a good thing to start again high level. Most of the time, it's a good idea to separate, to find the middle line between the two main lines, which make out the silhouette. And from there, if you really want to start separating here, then maybe it will be good to have a line that does this, right? And you could start deleting here. At least now I have a starting point. And then if I want to make my next separation, maybe it is a good idea to do it like this and then continue. Now, what did actually happen here? What happened here is that I made first a line that separates and finds the average line that listens to this line, which make out the main silhouette. And then I started to think about high level. Well, maybe the frontal part needs to be more armored, so the upper segment has like an incline, and then the upper, and then when we go backwards with the design, I make a negative incline again, so I go a little bit up. Then when I made the second line, I didn't do this random shit. I made a line which will mostly listen to this line over here. But because this is a smaller line, I didn't want to do this, for example, because when a line or a segment is smaller, it needs to involve less complexity. It is fine to have more complexity when this line is separating the whole design. But once I'm starting sub-designing and I'm going to continue with the segmentation of my design, then I want to make sure that the smaller lines will not carry as much complexity. And this is again what we see with your design, that even the smaller lines are having a lot of little shapes that are very confusing to the eye, right? So again, I guess what comes down to is thinking simple. Another good example would be now to counterbalance the complexity, because maybe if we make this black, it'll be easier for the eyes, because my eyes hurt a little bit. Now to counterbalance that a little bit, so this is the introductory to design philosophy, guys, is now this space feels empty. How to counterbalance it? Well, maybe some cockpit, maybe some air intakes, right? Functionality. But I want to mix functionality with aesthetics. So I'm going to counterbalance it with a line that maybe goes like this, right? And then it maybe can go like that. We can have here some scanning equipment, and here we have the cockpit. This looks already much better, I think, in my opinion, because we are having consistency. We are having the same sub-design language of panel segmentation as here. Here we still have the main line, which carries a lot of complexity. I came up with this line, which listens more to this one, putting more impact on the separation of the design. And then I counterbalance it with the exact same design language as I did here, right? So when I start to zoom out, I can definitely see that my design here starts to make more sense. I will definitely start to tweak it, because you always come up with new shapes that you don't intend to. So for example, I think now this is thinner than this, and it could work, but I really think that we can maybe find a nice balance and make this slightly thinner, make this incline slightly less aggressive, and really stretch it towards the tail like that, right? You want to make sure that when you come up with this shape, it has a flow as well, right? So it doesn't have weird bottleneck points in the middle of the design, right? Because when you have a design like this, we start thin, have a thicker point in the middle, thinner point at the end. So your lines in between, they cannot destroy or impact it in an aggressive level, right?
Okay,
Yeah,
Michal.
I hope it helped.
I think
Yeah.
it was very very helpful. I think. So maybe I don't know, Lester. Do you have any other question, or maybe someone else? Because I think Michal give you very deepful,
Yeah. I got
deep,
carried
deep.
away as well.
Yeah.
But
So
yeah,
yeah,
teaching is
remember,
not
guys.
passion, and
Yeah,
it's Darek's
remember,
passion
guys.
as well.
All these things you can imply also in your work, because as Michal say, this is the principle of design. As you saw, like things that say in Darek and things that say Michal, they are filling each other, and they are very complementary. So remember that. That this is what we are talking about. One project you can also implement in your project.
Definitely.
Yeah, do we have
Yeah,
like
are there
any?
any maybe
Yes.
additions that you want to cover, Darek?
No, you went full on. You just told me to keep it short, but you went full on. So
I know. I know.
so maybe keep it shorter next time. But I think we can maybe do one more of the feedback. If anyone has like any recent work in progresses that would like to share with us, and then we can wrap it up, I guess.
Yeah, especially that you feel that what Darek taught and Michał don't cover your problems that you feel you have.
Definitely, guys, don't be shy. Ask away. Now is the chance.
Yellow Rain, great. We invite you to join Michał class. It will be great to see you in our school. Yeah, I see that the guys are typing. Also remember, guys, you can join the stage and ask the question verbally. You don't have to write. Just only raise up the hand and I will invite you to the stage.
Yeah, meanwhile, I think, I don't know if, is my screen still shared?
Yeah.
Yeah. So my
Yeah,
next
we still
stage,
see yours.
normally, just to quickly show, because I think we are still waiting for questions, so maybe a 3 minute of what I did. In between the work, I had the time to sit down on evenings and do some exploration sheets. I really enjoyed this task. It's something actually I wanted to for a long time, the Ornithopter. My fiance actually started to read the books, and well, I don't have time to read super thick books. I listen to books, and I listen to books one at a time, and adding tune to that will take too long. However, when I was exploring, I had so much fun. I kept on exploring, and I kept on exploring. This was the first sheet I did. Then I did this one, and then I thought, well, how would House Atreides look like? So the main difference is that here I'm exploring a lot of organic forms. That's something that Darek said, like, hey, maybe it's too organic, right? And then I said, yeah, that might be a good point. So I started to like have some fun with more edgy explorations. Now the basic thinking process behind this, and again, I don't want to go too advanced. I leave that for our classes. But a very important thing to remember, guys, is to have a good inspirational point from the real world. Something that we already kind of briefly talked about. This is my reference sheet. And my thinking process behind gathering references is that you can segment it into pieces to make it easier for understanding your brain. An ornithopter design is a very unique design. You cannot just look at the jets and make a cool design on it. You cannot just look at dragonflies and grasshoppers, even though they are explained as an organic design. And you cannot just look at functional mechanics, even though there is a lot of function involved and that needs to be showcased, right? So my thinking process behind it is that I separate, I always separate the thinking process between reference of emotional reference and mechanical reference. So the emotional reference will be, even if I look at this bird and I want to extract certain details in my ornithopter design, then as a concept artist, I have to be successful at that. If I want to showcase certain design aspects about this bird, like what do I feel when I look at this bird? It feels fast, it feels sleek, it feels smart even. There's something clever about this bird when I see it. How will I invoke that into my design? Then you have mechanical reference. So what kind of mechanics will I show that showcase the immersiveness and the richness of that design, right? Will I go for something really modern, something more grounded? I like to always keep it grounded because I know it will always maintain a strong connection, right? Air intakes are very conventional, but you can always shape them in different forms, in different angles, so you can play around with the shapes of them. And I think also what Darek was showing was very important because this doesn't again apply only to vehicles, guys. When you're making a huge complex like the refinery, the same thing applies. Look at, for example, a castle wall. What do you feel? It feels fortified, it feels strong. Do you want to have that same feeling for the refinery? I think so, right? It's a harsh environment, it's a war environment. These structures needs to be somehow protected as well. But it cannot look like a fortress only. It needs to have some complexity. Something is happening there. Very important when you're playing with reference. So don't be a slave to one reference type only. Cut it in creative pieces because our job is creative and it is up to you how you play with it.
Okay, so Lorraine have the question about the references. What's your process when gathering those references and deciding to combine them? So yeah. So
Would
this
you
for this
would you
to
like
you,
to cover
Michal.
this one, Darek?
Yeah.
Oh, it's
No,
okay.
you
So
can.
there
Okay.
is
Yeah.
a free. Okay, so there is a free YouTube video, I think, on how to tackle reference on our Focal Point YouTube channel. So I do invite you to check that out. But since we are already talking, um, I think, sorry, that I kind of already answered the question. But of course, to go a little bit deeper into that is, well, I made here kind of a circle. And of For the Ornithopter specifically, when we are exploring the design, how does this design presents itself, right? Well, it cannot look like a jet from the real world. It needs to look like something out of this world. And when we hear that, concept artists that are starting out, they feel overwhelmed. Like, how do I make something that is out of this world? Don't worry. That is a term that is used by the audience that views it. When they see an ornithopter, when they see an airplane that is flapping its wings, that is already definitely out of this world. But when you think about it a little deeper and creatively, it is actually not out of this world. We have tons of creatures that are flapping their wings up and down in order to lift themselves off from the ground. The reason why airplanes are not doing it is because it will just kind of destroy them in the process, because airplanes need to be slightly larger, and we don't have the materials as of now to afford ourselves to have an engine that flaps huge wings up and down in order to make efficient airplanes. So we have jet engines, helicopter, turbine engines, which work way more efficient. So having said that, when you have a world like Dune, that doesn't mean that we should restrict ourselves to, these kind of real life world limitations. We have, again, plenty of creatures that are flapping their wings. So nature is the best designer. That's always something that we repeat in class, both with Darek, both for the environment class and the hardware class. And how you tackle that is up to you. So here you see, for example, let's take, for example, this sheet, another sheet. Definitely tons of references from real birds and dragonflies, but at the same time, they are grounded in reality, right? The functionality, the main form factor is being made up from a dragonfly or a bird. And then when we start dissecting this design on a smaller level, so I sometimes like to call it the sub-design language, because every single design here on this page, what does it have in common is that it has this kind of form factor. It has, let's do a simple 3D view. It has the kind of the main hub area. It has a tail, right? It has here certain supportive wings, maybe here on the side. It has a cockpit on the front. It is a main hub engine for the wings, and then we have the wings, right? And this is basically the form factor, meaning that this is your design limitation. You can maybe play with the proportions, but you cannot just, when you often work on a brief, whether it be a vehicle, an interior environment design, or a character design, you always, as a concept artist, have to work with certain limitations, right? So if this is your spectrum of vehicle design, right, so to speak, then you always have to work within limitations. And that is challenging because it might first feel like, oh, I'm so limited, but actually you're not, right? It is up to you to, within this limitation, make iteration on top of iteration. And that's something that I try to do here. I'm trying to adapt the form factor from nature, a dragonfly, and the sub-design language is still exotic. The paneling is definitely not directly captured from paneling of current aircraft, but it is again mixing both worlds together, right? So the mechanical designs, the sub-design language is strongly mechanical, so it carries a strong relatability with the real world, whereas the main shape of the aircraft feels exotic and out of this world. But again, this term for concept artists is has some gray waters, because in my opinion, nothing should be out of this world, because every successful design needs to carry a strong relatability with the real world. So this is how I play with my reference. And in order to end it visually a little bit, the Ornithopter is definitely, I would say, slightly more than half being impacted by its main form factor, which is the form factor of a dragonfly. So it's derived from nature, that sleek design. I would say, in order to make a strong impression of that it is an aircraft that is piloted by a human, that's always something that interests me as well, right? Something that is piloted by a human carries more character. It always needs a cockpit. We relate stronger with it when something has a point of a center. And again, with a creature is kind of the head area, right? And with an aircraft is again here the cockpit area. So I implement a lot of this detail into this section, which will be like the mechanical references and complexity. So I make a reference. And then this slide of the circle, which is, I guess, less than, I don't know, it's like 20%, 1/5, maybe a little bit less than 20%, would be left over for the sub-design language. So how does the paneling go, right? Because here I have very exotic paneling. It is somehow connected to the real world, but this kind of paneling is definitely not visible on modern aircraft. So I kind of mixed and looked also at other references, which, well, we won't have time to cover all of this here, but I think on a very rudimentary level, it will help you design not only further the Ornithopter, but your other vehicles, your environment tasks, and yeah, this will be my end point for that. Thanks for listening.
Yeah, we have also more questions. First question, Sabastardo. What is the thinking behind the way you describe the details along the surface of the design? I usually have the problems with this because many areas feel empty. I think it's can be seen also on design of the Ornithopter and also in design of the buildings of the factory. So maybe Darek, you want this time?
Yeah, actually, I would like
Say
to
something.
maybe go back to Lester pick concept. If anyone didn't actually post anything new, or maybe some of you guys actually have something new that you would like to share, but I cannot really share my screen, I guess.
So we have to change the screen, share the screen.
I cannot.
Do I need to turn off mine so that
I
you can share? Okay,
think
I'll turn
so.
off mine.
Yeah.
So
Okay, I'm not sharing anymore.
okay, great. Like of course, input and insightful talk by Michal. I think there's like so many valid points that we would inject onto the other areas of concept design, right? Like not only vehicles, not only
Exactly.
environments, not only characters, but also like small props, you know, certain buildings, or even like a certain elements like weapon, right? It all has like its own compound. And I'm gonna share my screen in a second. I'm just gonna bring back maybe the Lester piece that he posted for environment. However, if anyone would like to also share yours, please do. This is like let's say we do like last 10 minutes feedbacks. I think they are very insightful. Since we don't do that often, I think
Hey, yeah.
I think it's pretty cool. Let me just check. My Photoshop is a little bit laggy, probably because I'm also recording this session. However, if nothing more of the new works came up, I'm gonna stick to Lester, and we're gonna nicely synchronized with what's been said by Michal, right? So let's say that we take this environment as the example, and we try to digest the general form, right? The general like a vibe of your piece. I'm gonna just quickly rotate around. So Lester, you have very interesting and intriguing situation going on here, right? You have like a you have the like a certain sensibility of the flow of your lines, of your shapes in this design. However, I think the most problematic thing is that you have mostly small, right? Small and medium shapes. Why do I think is that a thing? I'm gonna just make a full screen because it's really laggy. So if I would just like bring bring down your structure here, right? This sort of like a dome, like area of environment, and we just try to kind of like digest the vibe of this shape, right? Like you have some chimneys on the top. It's pretty cool. The idea is definitely there. However, you have like all those elements. If you look at the width of them, if you look at the width of those supportive columns here, right? If you look at this shape, it's all kind of having the same small or medium silhouette, right? So the dimensions, the scale is very important, because if I just like, let's say I'm gonna play with just the medium shapes, right? This is your like triangular panel shape, and if I just gonna use this one and gonna bring or build a composition, right? Let's say I'm gonna maybe just slightly use a smaller ones as well here, and maybe again it gets like a bigger, your design becomes very linear, right? Like you can see that even when you put those buildings right next to each other, there's not much difference, right? This one in the scale, in the size, is a little bit smaller than this one. So basically it's exactly this relation. What we kind of miss is either like a bigger shape that combines them together, or the even smaller ones that kind of like bring the nice relation. So if we have this shape and if we're just gonna build a composition out of it, this one gets like very linear, right? Like the difference between the medium and the small shape is so minimal that the design becomes very linear, very basically aesthetically unpleasing, right? However, I like this shape factor, right? I like this like triangular shape, so we can change actually the attitude and approach to that by incorporating maybe more smaller elements, right? With a different size, right? So it can be small, let's say like a 50 meters, it can be 60 meters, it can be 100 meters. And then maybe all those, they will be attached to either like one huge structure, or maybe like a wider structure that kind of brings like an interesting vibe, right? It immediately break up the shape into the small, right? The bigger and the medium. That way you can relate those shapes even in different ways, right? You can just even detach this one, and maybe this middle section would be even like taller or basically bigger, and maybe you can even just adjust like some smaller bits, or maybe like do like one certain, you know, like a sloped line that kind of connects to them. Furthermore, you can do another iteration that's kind of like making this whole structure a little bit more squeezed. However, when it's like squeezed, it can also be more widened. So exactly what Michal showed in the dragonfly made by, I think, also Lester. I don't know why my Photoshop is like really clunky right now. And we can basically put all those right next to each other. I'm gonna just again get this a little bit wider. So maybe just smaller it up. Right. So I would say like we can evolve our shape into something that's basically has like certain, you know, redistribution of the shape, right? And this will always be better than just like a linear shape we had before, right? So I want to say that one thing is, of course, like how you can find a certain like a shape or a certain like a design sensibility, like Michal was showing regarding the dragonfly, and how you can basically incorporate the different approach to a sub level of the details inside. But also it's about how you can play with the proportions, right? So maybe the cockpit could be here, maybe the middle section could be wider, right? Maybe the tail could be actually, you know, much more dramatic, right? And this will be always better than basically having the toy-alike, cute, chunky structure. And the same principle gonna apply to the building, right? If you have just linear shapes, right, that are basically very similar in scale, very similar in height, they will actually, contradictionary to that, they will be, of course, worse than the shape that actually has like a the proportions, that has like a certain composition, right? So this will always have like more appeal, this will always have like more edge, more definition, right? So that's exactly how we can treat this one, right? Like if you have like this dome-like structure, all those like sub panels, they have like the same kind of the same kind of length, the same kind of width, right? But what if we make those panels much thicker, or maybe one side of the paneling will be purely white, you know, like with just basically a lot of empty space, and inside you would have like a lot of smaller panels, and maybe in between those panels you can have also like a smaller sections of the details. This will immediately make this whole piece much more interesting. Also the chimney part, you can have like a one maybe huge chimney, and inside you can have a composition of a smaller exhaust, right? This will immediately brings more fidelity and more interest area, right? So that's exactly how we want to think about composing the shapes, right? Don't forget about like a big shape, medium shape, and small shape. It doesn't mean that you have to always use one big shape. It doesn't mean that you always have to use like a one medium shape, right? You can still work around this one, for instance, right? And fortify this whole compound with a lot of like a smaller shapes or smaller details on top, maybe even inside the subdivisional detail that someone was asking in the chat. It can basically have the same visual flow but put on a small shape, medium shape, and a big shape, right? This way you compose the interest, you compose the designs into the more visual appealing forms. Some of the examples that we have here also are, maybe I'm gonna bring up some of the references from the Brutals architecture that I was searching through today, and this is a good one. And maybe, yeah, this one is great actually. Right, so if you basically wanted to break it down, you could say, yeah, this is like a boxy building, right? Let me just quickly erase the other part. This is like a boxy building, right? And what makes it like so interesting? Maybe we can add like some angular flow here, right? You can basically imagine that this foundation here would be angular, that kind of like a nicely break the shape, and this already makes it much less of just like a normal box, right? It's already basically creating certain flow. So maybe in side forms would be listening to that angle, right? So I'm gonna treat those subdivisional details exactly the same way as they are on this given example, but I'm not listening only to just like a straight lines. I'm listening to this angle that estimates how we basically gonna read the general shape, right? And on top, yeah, you can add like some of the smaller sections because we have right now the big shape divided into medium shape with like a small, small negative spaces, but it doesn't mean that we still cannot bring the other shapes also onto the table, right? Maybe we can just inject some extra paneling here. Maybe we can repeat this angular form, but I would probably not bring it like that. I would bring it here, so it's like a nicely contraposed to your design. And basically that way you can evolve your design from having just like a blocky or chunky building and basically incorporating an angular form to the box, right? So this is how you can evolve your designs onto something extra, right? And later on, of course, on top, if we want to get the last touch of this building, then we can, of course, adjust certain ideas like maybe like some functional antennas or some functional elements, right? Or if you don't want to obscure certain like logistic areas, you can maybe put the little markings or a little bit areas of how we basically have maybe the windows, maybe the breakup in the building. But as you can see, all those details inside, even when it's just weathering, right, it will be listening to this main shape. So it's exactly as you could see on that dragonfly example that Michał was showing, right? So all those like subdivisional details will be creating its own composition. So those subdivisional details also can create big, medium, and small compositions. Never forget about it, because if you have shape flow established, right, like this one is shape flow is something like that, right, and all the details or subdivisional divisions will be written inside of this shape, right? But they will be written in exactly the same way. So like we have like one big shape, one medium shape, and maybe you can have like also like some more cuts that are creating the subdivisional small shapes, right? That's how you basically build the subdivisional language division, right? So it will both involve into the environments and vehicles, but also it's gonna be involved into characters. So if you look at the knight armor, for instance, I'm gonna just bring it down very quickly. This reference, right? For instance, doesn't work. As you can see, just like as a final kind of like a summary, when you have this shape, right, of this chest plate here, and you see, of course, the chest plate function was to prevent you from being stopped in this area, right, on the belly, the chest, the ribs. But as you can see, there's some really interesting ornaments inside, and those ornaments, as you can see, they are listening to the flow of the whole chest plate, right? So it's exactly what Michał was showing on the dragonfly, what I was showing on the architecture, but now it also applies to the armors, it applies to the weapons, it applies to creature design, it applies to basically everything that you're gonna design, right? All those intersections, they are basically following form inside, as you can see, right? This is what you basically consider as a shape flow, or basically like the right distribution of subdivisional details, right? I hope it explains well, and I think we already went so in depth, but I think it was needed since we didn't do the session for a while, and I think we both have a lot of fun with it. So hopefully you guys can see the difference now, what you guys have done, which is amazing, but how you can push it and elevate it extra with that like design knowledge that we are constantly trying to inject into our students.
Okay, great, thank you. We have the question that is focusing more on the task. It's about the ornithopters. Taking the books, not to the movie, in consideration, the design is more thought on the bird's side. Is the Dragonfly movie inspiration something mandatory? So, Michał.
I think
I,
yes, because it is a very nice, exotic, and entertaining feature, and I think it has been explicitly explained in the brief that we wanted the form factor of a dragonfly. It needs to have flapping wings, so I would go with that one. Like mentioned before, I think it's always a good idea and challenging to give restrictions of what a certain design needs to feature, and then come up with numerous iterations to figure out what the best visual problem solving for that particular design would be. So yeah.
okay, and second question, I don't know if we have time for that, but we can ask. I can ask. Can we get some insight as to how incorporate the Atreides house's aesthetic into the industrial sort of design? Or more generally, how can we create a house design language and balance it with the rest of the design constraints?
It's a very good question. Do you want to answer this one, Darek, or do you feel like you have to relax your vocal cords?
Yeah, you can go on very quickly, and then we can wrap it up.
Just before
I
we start,
think,
yeah, I just want to say that it will be the last question, and we'll probably
yes, yeah. I think that
ending
we
the
both carried away a little bit. That really, I think it really shows that we showcased, both me and Darek here, the passion for teaching. When I was listening to what Darek had to say, it was beautifully explained. Certain things overlap with each other. That is definitely something that is done on purpose, because we see design as a whole, but don't forget that environment design, hardware design has their niches that, again, here we cover the rudimentary aspects of it. It is also very important to mention that before I continue with the question, and again, I don't want to hardcore market our school, but it's important to mention that we have now new bundle classes. So if you only want to focus on design and you don't want to take only one class and you don't want to take the whole term, then you only can pick the two design classes, which are with me and Darek, environment class and the hardware design class. Both are available on the intro and advanced level, where we only focus on, well, not only, but we mainly focus there on the design philosophy, as well as using the right tools in order to elevate yourself as an outstanding concept artist. With that out of the way, I would like to then answer the last question. There's a very long and extensive answer, so I want to try to keep it short. But it starts with observation. How to infuse certain cultural aspect, aesthetical aspect into a refinery. It really starts with observing what the real world has to offer. I think both Darek and me gave already some strong insights where to look, how to look. I know, we have a limited amount of time, but the same thing would apply if you want to, for example, think about, well, what kind of ornaments can I still force into a building that is mainly functional? We often think that form follows function, but I think with today's example, you can definitely notice that it is simply not true. How many iterations in the real world we have of cars, for example? Compare a Mercedes to a Toyota, and you will see that they both perform the same main function, but they both have a different sub-design language, because both cars, both brands, they focus on different priorities. Toyotas are just there to work, to be cost effective, and they need to be reliable, whereas a Mercedes needs to be luxury, it needs to have a certain aesthetical design language. and it needs to have also most of the time certain performance. Along with that comes as well how the car looks like. So these would be examples to think in mind, that a function is not a slave, that the shape of a function, they are not a slave to each other. You can make iterations of that, right?
Exactly.
So that would be, yeah, that would be the answer, unless Darek has maybe a pointer to follow up on that. Other than that,
Yeah, I think a car example is great since we both love cars, and basically, you know, when
Yes.
you're very much into that, you can basically very easily see the differences that one manufacturing from another, and for instance, how the design has been evolving across the years. Or for instance, recently I was talking to my father yesterday about the Hyundai designs, and the new Hyundais look very much like Audis. It's because
yes,
majority of old Audi designers actually moved to Hyundai, right? And they start helping with shaping the right shapes of the lights, the specific line of the body, the specific line of those like sportbacks, since
yeah,
which was iconic thing for Audi for so many years. And there is also like some really interesting, I think it's very nicely correlate with how do we teach. There's like a series of movies or like series of videos by the guy who's like breaking down the designs of the cars and how they changed across like generations, and why for some of like facelifted cars the design principles start to collide and become a little bit overdone. So if I find it, I will definitely link it to you guys so you can check it out. It's very insightful, it's very interesting, and it hopefully nicely resonates with what we've discussed, because I see a lot of similarities how this guy explained design principles, because design principles are usually you know, as you see, like they are the same for all subjects, but they can be explained in different ways. However, I believe me and Michal are doing it very similarly, because we basically like same things. We love to teach those things, and we both work in the industry on the same stuff. So recently, he is doing more environments. I'm doing more vehicles, which is kind of crazy for those that probably know only our works from online, which also shows that strong fundamentals, strong design knowledge is going to be easily transformed into different topics only if you want to, only if you're having open mind, and if you really are interested and passionate about design. No matter what you're gonna design, you're gonna succeed in it. So yeah, nothing more to add from me.
yeah. Well put, Darek. Nice insights, I think. So yeah.
Okay, so thank you guys. So I think that will be end for this today live. Thank you guys for sharing your knowledge. I think the feedbacks that you give are beneficial for all participants in the scholarship contest. And yeah, guys, remember that you have still 10 days to prepare all the designs and post them in finals. And also, please remember to put the high resolution on Google Drive or some other drive in the cloud, and share the link to so we can check them. So we also can check them. Also, as Michał say, we have open soon. We will start a new term, so there are still places if you want to join us. Don't be hesitated to enroll to the classes. And from my side, I think it was great. Yes, about that. We are recorded this live. We'll check how the record look and try to work on it and post them on the YouTube as soon as possible. So for those who missed or just cannot join us today, there should be available in our YouTube channel. So yeah, so from my side, I think also thank you guys. Thank you, Darek. Thank you, Michał, for sharing the knowledge once again. Thank you, all our
Hope you
audience.
learned
I
something,
hope
Wojtek.
this, yeah, as always, learning. I may be just showing, but I'm learning.
Awesome. Thank you,
Um,
guys. Awesome to do it again after such a long while. We don't overpromise anything, but we definitely want to do more sessions. We want to keep the channel alive. If you want to keep boosting that up, please just share the knowledge about this channel. This is still a relatively small channel, but we want to keep this as an incredible community for our students, former, future, current, everyone, right? So keep it up, and we definitely want to keep it up as well.
yeah.
Remember, guys, we start the 13th of October, so it's less than a month until we start the fall term. Tell your friends about this Discord channel, share it around. We really appreciate it joining us today. Really love to grow this community. It really doesn't hurt to join, share your work, and keep it together here as a wolf pack. And see maybe some of you guys in class. Would love to. We cannot wait to start again. See you guys.
Take care.
So yeah, bye.